Success in business can be like one, two, three when you have the right information and the right leadership skill sets to advance your business process. Today, I have a very dynamic personality that can help you develop the know how, the skill set, the mastery, the tools that you can apply to scale your business like one, two, three. Today, my expert comes with a wide range of knowledge. Today, you will learn about performance management and the significant role that performance management plays in up-leveling your business success. You will also learn about emotional intelligence and the significant role that emotional intelligence plays in helping you to manage your business processes and people. But the personality I'm about to introduce to you is more than all of what I've just said. They're also the founder and the brain behind V Formation and Training Development. And you will have a chance to learn all about what this organization is all about. But to add the icing on the cake, the individual that you're about to be introduced to also would have worked across the world. So they have experience, and they say experience teaches wisdom. So be prepared for a lot of knowledge and experience that can really transform the way you see business and give you a chance to significantly leapfrog your growth. So I now want to encourage you to join me in welcoming Tony Ragunana. My friend, how are you?
I'm good, Gary, and how are you?
I am
Doing
phenomenal.
well.
I must say it's a tremendous pleasure to have you in studio and to be talking with you about the rich history that you have in performance management and emotional intelligence. I do believe that these particular talent plays well into helping businesses to achieve the ultimate goal. I want us to begin by looking at, tell us exactly what is V Formation Training and Development.
Well, V Formation I started in 2011, and the idea came to me with what I was experiencing as a trainer. I was a trainer with Abbott Labs for a couple of years, and I started off as sales training. And when I went on my own, what I saw is that there were a lot of issues that individuals were having. Even great salespeople or great customer service representatives, they have to go back in an environment to work. And in that environment, you have leaders who may sometimes be creating sort of this toxic environment where it makes it a bit difficult for people to get things done. So V Formation really comes with how birds fly. When birds fly, they always have one goal in mind. All the birds are aiming in the same direction. They never bump into each other. And the leader sometimes is replaced because the leader of those birds creates a wind current so the others could glide. So that is the idea behind V Formation, is forming communities, right? So that is how the idea came across. So I got into performance management to address all of the aspects of performance, starting with
Awesome.
how values are developed, how competencies are developed, and what they mean for strategy in the long run.
Before we do that deep dive into performance management and emotional intelligence, can you talk to us a little bit more about lab? And I know you were largely in food and nutrition. Can you share with us what that experience was like for you?
Well, it was great in the sense that at that time, I wanted to get into pharmaceuticals. So getting into pharmaceuticals was something that it was a passion of mine, just being in sales. And one of the things that we had to do was just improve lives, and that was the purpose of the job itself. So I started off as a pharmaceutical representative, and then I got promoted into business management, which involved the entire Caribbean, and then eventually into sales management. So I had a particular region of the Caribbean that I was responsible for. So that helped me to understand not only about product, but about how people run their businesses, because I had to work with distributors in different islands. And that is where the idea of culture and values and performance came to me.
I'm really happy that you said what you said, because you're saying is that your knowledge in performance management is not only measured in a narrow frame, it is measured throughout the wider Caribbean. So you're pulling your data on what is essential tenets of performance management that one needs to look at in order to achieve optimum performance. Let us try to now define what is performance management in your context. I notice that you are a performance management specialist. Correct me if I'm wrong. Performance management is where you're able to set clear targeted performance that you want to accomplish. But it's not only about setting the target that you want, it is also ensuring that you have the human competency that is able to, you can leverage to reach the target and perhaps go beyond that target. My interpretation, but I'd love to have your views.
Yeah, well, performance management is really how you manage performance from the beginning of an employee's life cycle within the company to the end. So it's making sure that we have the performance that we have defined. Because one of the things with performance management is companies define what they want to see. And it's not the same for every company. Every company will define something different. In other words, when we define things like competencies and behaviors, we are defining what we actually want to see and how do we manage people within that context. So the reason why I mentioned competencies is people sometimes confuse competencies with values and core values. A core value is something that a company believes in. It's internal beliefs. But one of the issues with core values is that it's not observable. So we have to now translate core values into something that is observable. And that is where the competencies and behaviors come in. So when we define these things, then we start looking to people now to sort of demonstrate these behaviors. And of course, the competency takes not only the behaviors in mind, but the skills and knowledge that are going to combine with those behaviors to give you what you want to keep knocking my mind. To keep knocking, to keep aligned with what values do you want to see. So in other words, let me give you an example. If we want a value like customer service excellence, just as an example, then you are not the only company saying that. You are not the only company that believes in that. What customer service value, what customer service excellence means to you will come from how you demonstrate that is what are the behaviors and competencies you want to see in people so that you could deliver on that. Does that make it clear? A
Yep,
little clearer than it was?
definitely. Being in the corporate world for many years, performance management is a very topical issue. It's like a hot topic. What I want to table is what are those factors that influences optimal performance? And let me just make a few suggestions, and you're going to see how much of it makes sense. One might want to say that to enhance performance, you need to have your thesis that you will now introduce to the candidate, your training programs. One of the things that I've seen is that you may have an excellent thesis, but not all candidates respond equally to that thesis in terms of enhanced output.
Right.
What we see happens also, and I'm happy that you have experience in the pharmaceutical industry, because one of the things that I'm seeing also is that performance also is not based only on academics. It is also based on the health related issue. But in your context, what are those factors that influences the high performers?
Okay. So there are a couple of things here. In 1934, there was a psychologist by the name of Kurt Lewin. He came out with the formula that behavior is a function of a person in an environment. Where does that formula come from? If you think about where was the first time that you experienced an environment? Where was the first time that you experienced an environment? It was in the womb. That initial environment had something to do with our behavior. When we are born to either biological parents, adoptive parents, whoever your primary caregiver is what is creating the environment, and that sort of dictates behavior. So when we go into companies now, we have a person going into a company. So they are going into an environment. You could take the most motivated person and put them in the wrong environment, and it will affect their behavior, and vice versa. You could take the worst person and put them in the best environment, and it's going to affect what happens next. So getting things right is not just about having the right person is also about creating the right environment, and
Very,
that comes from leadership. But of course, that person has to have some emotional control in terms of how they are going to deal with certain things. And when I focus on the environment, I always talk about what are the conversations that leaders need to have to make sure that we could have the right environment. Is there clarity for people when they start working? Is there clarity? Do leaders have the expectations conversation with people to know not only what they have to achieve, but what are the behaviors we need to have in order to get the right performance? Also, are there performance conversations, and how often? Now, companies around the world are moving away from this once a year performance appraisal that is like an ornament on the shelf that people uh, sort of, well, they don't like it generally. So we want to have more conversations during the year so that people know exactly how they are doing at any step during the year, because nothing on a performance appraisal should be a surprise to anybody. If it is a surprise, it means that there were no conversations before that. So we always want to make sure that there are conversations that support what you are doing at every step of the way. In addition to that, what else do leaders have to do? They have to give feedback, both positive and negative. They have to coach people, regardless of what that challenge might be within that person, in order to develop that person. Of course, that comes out of the performance appraisal as well. What is the developmental goal that people need to define so that you know what you need to work on for the next quarter or for the next year, for example? So that is,
okay,
in a nutshell, that is sort of all of the things that are required to have optimum performance.
great. I'm happy that you reference environment because I can also see environment from the context also of socialization.
Yes.
Uh, People are a reflection of how they are socialized. But when I look at leaders like yourself, I recognize that your task is not easy because you're responsible for interpreting the organization vision. You're responsible for diagnosing the human resources. You're responsible for implementing programs, adjusting programs so as to ensure you get a desired performance outcome. I want to pose another question as we talk about socialization. Of recent, have been talking about academics and making academic make sense because what we see happens very often. You have a candidate who have been socialized in a particular way, and then you recognize that that socialization is not in all cases ideal for the organization. So when that candidate comes into the organization, you now as the leader, you have to go through not only the selection, recruitment, the placement, but you now have to go through a whole acclimatization of the individual, not just to the culture of the organization, but to performance standard. What would you say? Do you think there's a need for perhaps how institutional socialization is done at the academic level? Do you think it can make any contribution in making your task a little bit easier when it comes to how you train human resource? If some of the content that you're looking at, human performance optimization, if all of this is looked at perhaps at an academic level, what impact you think it can have on the organization and perhaps freeing up some more time for you to accelerate the business process?
Could you clarify for me what you mean by academic level?
By academic level, I'm referring to tertiary learning. You find that within the Caribbean and other parts of the world, you find that the way persons are socialized to learning, it might be a lot of theory. And then when you come to the organization, you have theory and practical. But because they have been socialized based on theory, they have difficulty translating that into practical performance, which makes it difficult for the organization heads, department heads, to move a process forward. It slows down that process.
Right. So that is one of the downfalls of tertiary education for me, because I don't think there's something like emotional intelligence, for example, being taught at the tertiary level. So this is why companies have to really define the behaviors specifically that they are looking for. Because yes, people may come in with all kinds of education in terms of degrees and that type of thing. And certainly it would add to the skills and knowledge that they have. But if they have not worked in that environment before, a lot of the behaviors come into play, because now you could have people with tons of education. For example, I have seen people come in with tons of skills and knowledge, but they are not behaving the way that they are supposed to behave within the environment. That is why you have to define the behaviors you want to see. Define the behaviors. Of course, if you're hiring an accountant, you're going to hire an accountant that has maybe a ACCA or a degree in accounts. If you're hiring an engineer, then hire an engineer. But remember, the one thing that is going to set the right engineer or the right accountant apart is how they are behaving within the environment. Because if you want things like initiative and creative thinking and teamwork and critical thinking, then we have to ask the type of questions that are going to, or have the right recruitment process that is going to get the right behaviors and put people in the right places, because that makes a difference. People could talk all they want about education and degrees and what they have, but skills and knowledge are easier to teach than a behavior. And if a company defines, let's say, 5 core behaviors that they want to see, and we would call them competencies, because the competencies are, like I mentioned before, are the mixture of the behaviors and the skills and knowledge. But sometimes not all competencies are teachable. So some competencies will have to be the price of admission. Like, I cannot teach integrity within a company. You have to come with integrity. You may have to come with commitment. But other things like maybe teamwork and communication skills, adaptability, you may be able to develop somebody into that. So that is what makes it different between the right person and the wrong person, is how they are behaving.
I must say, I must admire you for the work that you're doing. And I do believe that the role that you're playing has been having an impact on organization. And I know it can continue to have tremendous impact on organization. But I know there's a lot of work ahead, I'm happy, however, that we have a lot of great minds that are coming into play, and they are bringing out tools that can help subject matter experts like yourself in terms of achieving your training objective. Today, they're talking about neuroplasticity, and that's how to help people to rewire their thinking in a particular way. But what I want us to dive into just a little bit is emotional intelligence.
Right.
When we first talk about emotional intelligence, I mean, I was happy, I was excited about that topic, because I do believe for one reason or the other, it is on the plate. It's significant, it is on the plate in terms of how it can really impact the organization. Now, when I hear emotional intelligence, I believe that emotional intelligence is that trend that runs throughout the organization, throughout the business ecosystem, if you really understand it well. Because emotional intelligence is about interfacing with people, is about being sensitive in terms of what you say, how you respond to people. But it goes deeper than that. I would love to have your take, your experience on how important emotional intelligence is in the ecosystem of business.
Oh, it's extremely important. You know, one of the emotional intelligence is broken into four different parts. The first part is self-awareness. Then there's self-management, then relationship management, and social awareness. Now, one of the most important parts of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, because if you are not aware of how you show up, and I'm putting show up in inverted commas, if you are not aware of that, then you would not be able to understand what feedback would look like, especially if it's negative. Because somebody may say something to you, and you may say, well, that's not me. And that is sometimes, that happens a lot, because people are not aware of how they actually show up. So that self-awareness is crucial, because all of this, the emotional intelligence really determines how leaders show up and how the type of environment they create around their team. Imagine something like, there's a lot of talk of things like psychological safety. What is psychological safety? We want to make sure that people within your team feel safe to say what they feel, to say what their opinion is, even if it's if it's not in agreement with what the leader's opinion is. But it's up to the leader to create that environment, to create that type of environment where people will feel comfortable saying what they have to say, if anything. And even in times of crisis, how are you going to manage that? How are you going to manage yourself? You can't have a leader who loses control all the time in crisis, because how is that going to look for the people who are supposed to follow them? So emotional intelligence is a big part of business, a major part of it today. But not just business, it's a major part of our professional and personal lives as well.
I really love the depths that you have and your play on words. I really love it. I love the statement that you make, psychological safety, and how you build your storyline around it. I do believe that what you're saying is true. And I do believe in today's world, I think that people have to go through so much of mental calculation before they speak, because these days we find that, everything can be so offensive. On the international scene, I am looking at a young lady, Candice Owens.
Right.
She made a statement, and that statement was, interpreted conveniently in a particular way. And when the world listens to stuff like that, it makes you, sometimes you're forced to walk on egg if you are keen on offending or not offending people. And I think that also plays a lot into self-awareness, because when you are self-aware, you recognize that one of the things that you have to be true to is yourself, and sometimes being true to yourself by default may create scenarios where not everyone will identify with what the way you're thinking, and you just have to be comfortable with that.
And that is where the emotional intelligence comes in, because I support that expression. I support that expression, because if somebody disagrees with you, they should have an opinion and be comfortable for them. It should be comfortable for them to say what they feel, because then you could have a conversation. What happens? The thing is, what happens without the conversation? What happens when we don't have it? It means that you go away disliking me. I will go away disliking you because I can't understand their opinion. But when we have the conversation, you see, relationships fall apart because we don't have the conversations. And that is personal and professional.
Yeah.
We need to
have the flip side of that too. When you are not fully self-aware, you could be gaslighted into silence.
Yes, that is
and
true.
That is a terrible place to find yourself. And so, man, I love this conversation. It can go in so many different directions, but we would need to have more of these conversations.
We can have all the social justice conversations offline.
You got it. Yeah. I want to look at some open questions now. I want us to talk about success. And I would love for you to tell us, in your own definition, I mean, you have worked throughout the Caribbean, you have represented international brands. How would you define success?
For me, success as an individual or for a company?
We can look at it from both perspectives.
For me, one thing that comes to mind.
Perhaps a unique way in which you can look at it is, how do we look at performance management and say, hey, this is the model, this is the implementation, this is the timeline, this is the results. Perhaps that could be one way of looking at success. Your take.
From an organizational perspective, it's when everything is in alignment, when people are living the values that they have promised their internal and external customer. For me, that is success, because when you are living your values, and when your people, your customers are happy with you, it means that you have a certain level of success. But if you have an internal culture within your organization that is exactly what type of culture you want, for me, that is success. From an individual level, I think success is me being able to be as authentic that I could be within my space.
Yeah.
Because that allows me to be as happy as I could be. But when if I am prevented somehow from being as authentic as I want to be, then it becomes a source of unhappiness. Because just like organizations will have values, I have my values as well, and one of the things that I always notice with people, especially when I go into companies, is when they are not allowed to be who they are. So that is where the alignment with the competencies and behaviors come into play. Because if you are hiring people who possess those competencies and values that that the company wants, then it means that you will be living according to you, and you are not playing a role that they want you to play. You are not pretending to be something else and someone else,
Mhm.
and that is where the happiness will come from for me.
Yeah. Um, well, what you're saying there also carries me back to the question that I asked early on, because we can see this from two different perspectives. One is institutional socialization giving us the human output to drive the organization forward. Based on the research and feedback that you're getting when you're talking to there's business leaders, there's more to be desired. On the flip side of that, you may have cases where the human resource are well trained, visionary, but then when they come into the organization, they reach a glass ceiling that is really not giving them the empowering experience to push the development of that organization. Sometimes you find that that happens, which coincides with what you were saying. So that's a great point. Now, as we look at performance management, as we look at emotional intelligence, um, these are not necessarily skill sets and mindsets that are formed overnight. What are habits that you think can influence success in these regards?
That's a good question. I think one of the when you say
I
habits,
guess repetition. I guess repetition will be one of them.
yeah, repetition and commitment to
And
learning and commitment to developing. And but one of the keys in all of this is you being aware of what your developmental goal is as an individual. Because if you are not aware of what your developmental goal is, then it becomes difficult to improve it because you don't know what it is a case of unconscious incompetence, right? So it's so let me give you an example. When I was growing up, I mean, even in my 20s, I lacked assertiveness. Like, I was not an assertive person at all, and that cost me a lot of money and a lot of time as well, and it cost me a lot of relationships as well, because I didn't feel free to say what I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it, because I was always, I'm that type of personality that was always into maintaining the relationships. So
Gotcha.
you understand, it's called the amiable personality in some circles. But my boss in pharmaceuticals, at least one of them, he recognized that within me, and told me that I needed to develop that a level of assertiveness. Just sometimes just in when you are going about your daily work, ask for more, ask for things, say what you don't like. If somebody's talking to you a certain way, well, um, tell them that you don't appreciate it. But if at first it came across like I was being aggressive when I started to say it, because what used to happen to me, and this is key to understand, is as an amiable personality, when I went into, for example, business meetings while I was in pharmaceuticals, I would stay quiet. I would be quiet, and somebody would be saying something I disagree with, and then I would stay, and it would build and build and build, and eventually, when it came out in a way that you don't want to hear, right? That you don't want to hear it, right? Very expressive, and I was already in an emotional hijack by the time it came out, because I held it in for too long. I had to learn over the years to say something while I was calm. So the difference would be like this. I would say, if I let it build up, then it will sound like this. Gary, I don't agree with that. But if it came out while I was calm,
Calm.
then I will say, Gary, I don't agree with that, but I'll tell you why. See the difference? So sometimes when we let things build up, and there are certain types of personalities that do that, they let things build up and build up and build up, and eventually when it explodes, it's too late to repair the relationship. I saw this, I read about this analogy in a book, Trauma Proofing Your Kids, some years ago. And they talked about the snow globe. The snow globe, you know what a snow globe is? You shake it up and then you leave it to rest, and then everything, all the particles would settle eventually.
Yeah.
So what happens with a lot of us in childhood is that we had experiences where even in our adult years, that snow globe is still shaken up in our head. We are still affected affected by it. And when we go into an environment where we experience something close to that or something similar to that, we react because we haven't had a time to let that snow globe settle in our brain. So, and what allows it to settle? If you and I have an argument and you storm out of the room and I storm out of the room, then snow globe is shaken up in my head, snow globe is shaken up in my head. But what do we need? We need a conversation. When we calm down, we need at least a conversation so that that snow globe could settle, so then we can move forward with what we have to get done. If that makes any sense. I don't know how you.
No, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And first of all, I can say that I identify with you when you was a younger person, because I too was not as expressive as I am now. And I might allow you to push me once, push me twice, and still push me a third time. So a lot that you have said coincide with me. And the part that I was smiling about is when you say trauma proof your kids. Because I want to say that what you have said, I'm guilty of it, because I know that I wasn't outgoing the way that I wanted to. You know, I ensure that all of my kids are the complete reverse of that. Now, you only have to assume that you're going to match the toe and they're going to be extremely responsive to you, to the extent that I have to say, be calm. And part of what I did to trauma proof the kids, two of them are black belt, and the last one, they're on the way to become black belt. So they have this excessive confidence when they go into, you know, any kind of situation. So I said, no, you have
You need to be careful.
very careful. Right? So as you were talking, I'm smiling because, you know, you're perfectly correct, you know, with what you're saying. But I can identify with what you're saying. I think most of us would have gone through some form of that. For me, I would say to people, I'm an introvert, but most people, when they hear that I'm an introvert, they don't believe me because I talk a lot. All right.
Right.
But I'm an introvert that has a special skill or a number of special skills, and I love articulating myself on those skills that I have.
Right.
But I think being an introvert is not bad, because it is because I'm an introvert. I like being by myself. I like being by myself, thinking my own thoughts, developing my own concept. That in of itself has allowed me to write multiple books. You know, I have many, many books because I have alone time. I think that if I was an extrovert, I might have been out all the time, just going, connecting, and I would not have had those books. So I think that there's two sides to the coin, but I can identify with a lot of what you said. The question that I want to come to next is, with a level of success that you would have attained in working with many businesses, how would you define what is your blueprint for success?
For me, is making sure that the organizational culture with the company that I'm working with is something that they want to see. Of course, not everything is up to me. I mean, I will meet you up to a certain point, but there's a requirement that I have from leaders to do their part. So if they have clarity, because that's one of my favorite words, is clarity. If they have clarity in terms of what they are supposed to do, and there's clarity from my end in terms of those definitions of what values you want, what competencies you want to see, how do we define them on a performance appraisal? How do we use those to have the conversations? If I have done my part, then success for me is making sure that when the leaders do their part, that the result is exactly what you want to see as an organization.
Right. Let me bring the question back to you also a little bit. You spoke about early on that you were not the most outgoing. Many of us are not necessarily born with that skills, but you develop it, you learn it, you master it over a period of time. Would you care to share with us your blueprint that helped you to overcome all of that, to be the master that you are today doing what you do?
Well, I'm still an introvert. So
oh, you were an introvert too.
I don't think I'm ever going to change from that amiable personality, right? I still have the amiable personality. I'm still relationship focused, because one of the differences between the amiable personality and maybe expressives from the drivers and analyticals, for example, is that amiables and expressives have a relationship focus generally. They are different from maybe the drivers and analytical personalities that have more of a task focus. So those things are sometimes in conflict, because while my no there's a popular psychometric test. It's called the Big Five, and I use all the time. I mean, I think I mentioned that when we
Yeah,
talked
yeah, we
before.
talked about it. Yeah.
My Big Five profile was, I was very high on conscientiousness, which I have the need to get things done, but I'm also very high on agreeableness, which is I'm really too focused on making sure I maintain relationship. And because I'm high on agreeableness and conscientiousness, I want to get everything done, but I want everybody to get along. That is a source of stress. So I had to sort of develop my level of assertiveness over time. And
Hmm.
that wasn't overnight, like you mentioned before. That it took years for me to do that. It took a number of years, but it's just because I was making the decision to open my mouth more. I made the choice to jump into things and tell people exactly how I was feeling. And that took some time. That took some time
Yeah.
to do. So coming out of that and being able to do what I do today, and making sure that I could be very frank and have candor with leaders generally, allowed me to express how I felt, what I feel people should do, and what do we need to do together. So I had some things to add, some things to take away, but some things I needed to just improve on.
I like that. I must say, I really like some of the methods that you talk about and that you use right now that has aided you to master your craft. But just a little something to laugh about. I don't know if you're in the same boat. When I say to my wife I'm an introvert, she said, "You're fooling yourself. You talk too much." I don't know if you're in the same boat.
No, I actually, I'm probably the opposite. I don't talk a lot at home. I talk more when I'm out.
That you're out. No, well, if you bring the business at home, you tend to talk a lot too, right? Because
All
you
right.
hear a
Yes,
lot.
yes, yes.
You hear a lot. I like that. All right. Challenges. What challenges you had to overcome to be where you are today? I can share some of mine with you.
Sure.
When I was very young, and I can reflect on my teens, I always know that I had inside of me the ability to speak publicly. But being an introvert, that is a challenge. I had to work hard to break through those challenges. And some of the things that I do, I'll develop my vision board in terms of my daily speaking habits. I joined a Toastmasters club, and I had a lot of practice. You start to learn communication skills, leadership skills. So I went through all of this to overcome the challenges. To the extent today, we were laughing about my wife said I talk too much because I mastered the craft well. What are some of the challenges that you might have had to go through to be where you are today?
Well, I think, the one challenge is the one I mentioned before. It's me coming out of that stage where I was not afraid to express myself. But I think one of the major challenges for me is when you have decided to go out on your own and develop your own business, then you realize the whole world could be against you if you keep your mouth shut. But the other challenge was knowing exactly what to do and how. Right. So developing a business, as you know, is not easy. It's something that we have to plan out and talk to the right people and open the right doors, and those are the things I had to sort of develop. So when I got into the institutions, I got into several of the teaching and learning institutions in Trinidad. I developed a bit of a following, and that made it a bit easier for me to know what I had to do, especially on social media, and those things were fairly new to me. So but being on that, you have to be, again, very expressive with your ideas, with your both verbally and in writing. That was probably one of the biggest challenges I had coming out of
Okay,
it.
great. One of the things that I learned along the way is that your ability to speak and communicate clearly equates to success. It equates to wealth creation. As you look back at your earlier life, do you have any regret? Do you believe that if, out of you know, since the you hear bow and the race start, perhaps if you were mentally attuned to the things you are today, you would have been more successful financially or in any other way? Do you look back at that with any regrets?
My regret is only not starting what I'm doing earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the biggest one.
I got you.
Yeah, I should have done it like 5 years earlier
Ago.
than I did. Yeah. 5 years earlier than I did. Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm quite certain that with the way you think, you will be using performance management to definitely catch up on the 5 year gap that you
Oh
believe
yeah,
there.
yeah. Well, it's become a way of life now. You know, it's not something that is just a job. It's more of a habit.
The next question I want to pose to you is what inspired you to become an influencer in your industry? Because you are an influencer. You know, when you go into an organization, your vision is to interpret that organization, culture, goals, vision, and to align your training content to that to make impact within the organization itself. What would you say inspired you to become an influencer in your industry?
I think for me, I like to see things from a holistic sort of point of view. And when I was in pharmaceuticals, I saw how people were being affected by the environment they were in. As you know, I talk a lot about environment, and when I saw how people were being affected, I'm saying, well, it's not just about them; it's about how the environment is. And I decided, what could I do to fix the environment as well as the person? And that is where emotional intelligence and performance
Um,
management sort of came together, and that is where the V formation came together as well, with in terms of how
oh,
birds fly.
got you.
So it's about taking all the parts and sort of putting them together to make sure that everybody could go in the same direction.
Great, great.
Because
Uh,
performance management and emotional intelligence are very closely related. They can't exist without each other.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do believe that every great leader needs to understand emotional intelligence because it is your ability to leverage emotional intelligence that will help you to optimize the level of results that you get from the human resources.
That's
I
it.
think what emotional intelligence allows you to do is to be flexible in terms of how you set yourself up to realize your management objectives. And when it comes to dealing with human being, is no one size fits all. And I think emotional intelligence gives you that kind of flexibility to take everybody's situation in their own context and respond to it based on an intelligent manner.
Yeah,
So
and everyone will have a different challenge.
yes,
That is where,
yes.
where all the coaching and everything comes in, and the
Comes
conversation.
in,
Yeah.
definitely. What impact do you want to make?
Impact do I want to make?
Yeah.
I want to make a difference for people. I want them to be able to see when they interact with me where we could go from here to here. I want to just continue to do good work, and for people to say, well, Tony does good work with the people that I interact with and that I work with. Obviously, I can't change the whole country, or I can't change the whole, or the Caribbean, or the whole world. But could I at least make a difference for the few people that I am with?
I like that. You know, and let me just come back just a little bit to performance management. I see the role that you're playing as being so vital, so important, so necessary for businesses because it is only by the effective use and deployment of performance management the manager can now begin to think about the possibility of scaling their business from a local brand into a national brand, into a regional brand, and into the international brand. I do believe as the performance manager, the performance specialist, you are also tasked to see the organization goal from all of these different standpoints and really align the type of performance that is necessary to help the organization to get there. So I know it's a tremendous role that you are playing in your field. And again, I want to say hats off to you, kudos to you for the great work that you're doing right now within the Caribbean, and that has happened ripple effect across the world. But the next question I want to ask you, my friend, is how do you want to be remembered? Is it just how do you want to be remembered? As a specialist in your field. You are a performance management specialist. You are an emotional intelligence specialist with years of experience doing what you're doing. How do you want to be remembered?
As somebody who cared about getting the right culture within the organization. Not somebody who just did the work, but somebody who actually cared about doing good work.
Great, like that. Well, we are about to wrap up. What are the major future plans that you have for your business, for your brand? What are some of the major moves that you have planned for the future?
Well, of course, I'd like to continue what I'm doing, and probably for me, work with different people. And I'm glad you called me. So work with different people to get, I would say, a greater net, and have influence and a greater impact out of the Caribbean. So people could be aware of what I do and what I could do for them in the future.
Definitely. And we have a lot of talking to do.
Yes.
We are already we'll have some conversation around the Global Business and Finance Association, and we have some talking to do there, and among so many other things. So we will be doing some collaboration in that regards. How important is access to capital to realize some of the future vision that you have in mind?
Right now, the capital is not something that I actually need, because a lot of what I do is highly dependent on social media. Unless I wanted to actually have a physical school, to do what I do, but now everything is so IT oriented that
Yeah,
it's
I know
not possible.
since the COVID, people have become highly
Yeah,
digitized.
yeah. COVID had changed a lot. Has changed a lot.
Yeah. Mhm.
So that is, I haven't given capital a lot of thought yet, but maybe when we talk in the future, we could, maybe new ideas will come to mind, and we could talk about how that could play a part in my growth and expansion.
Great. Definitely, because we have one of our arm is Global Capital Inc. And
Right.
what they do, we work with businesses, mainly US-based businesses, in 50 states. We work with them to help them to start to scale, to access capital, and to integrate their operation in the market. That's something that we can definitely talk to you about as you begin now to expand your reach. Something that we can definitely talk about. The last question that I have for you is, what are essential money habits that you think people generally should have?
Money habits.
Yeah,
Investing, I think, for one, and not spending things on the unnecessary, not
I like
spending on
that.
the unnecessary things. I have to talk to my children about that all the time. Do you actually need that?
Yeah,
We need it. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
What I
I
find
think
sometimes,
yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, go
Go
ahead,
ahead. Yeah.
go ahead. Mm.
No, for me, I'm not a very I don't buy a lot of things. I'm not into things so much. I'm more about doing things. But my children and the rest of my family, my wife and children tend to be, I need this. I need a new outfit, or I need some new shoes, or I need something. I'm the complete opposite. So I'm criticized for that at home. You should wear something different. Yeah, but
You're very frugal. I know how it is. I think kids, I don't know, perhaps there's a phase that they will go through, but I find kids will be kids. With my children, I spend a lot of time with them since they're small, much younger than they are today, and I will talk to them about financial intelligence, so they can give you the book on, we work to earn, we earn to save, we save to invest, we invest to build wealth, man. But
well,
when
I
these
didn't.
guys, ah,
I wasn't so colorful with my explanation, but that's good.
it's all right. It's okay. It's okay. But very often they spend, and I allow it to go through that phase because one of the things I talk about a lot, there's no harm in spending, but I think that there's a right and wrong way.
Yeah.
And for me, is that if you're going to create a liability by spending, ensure that you have at least three assets and let the asset pay for the liability.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
So, my brother, I must say, it has been such a pleasure talking with you today. I have learned a lot. I've learned about psychological safety, among other things. Perhaps we need to do a single discussion on that.
Yeah.
I've
That
learned
that
about so
that is a broad topic. Yeah.
yeah, it's very broad, it's very deep, and this is only the beginning, and we'll be doing so much more talking. So I really want to thank you for being here today, and for the audience, I want to say hi to the audience. Today we have over 30,000 new subscribers who have subscribed to our platform. We are seeing that over 70% of those who are looking looking, you have not yet subscribed. So I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and share. So you will be the first to get these content that we are bringing to you on a regular basis. So I trust that the listening audience from over 50 countries, I trust that you would have found today's content interesting, inspiring. I know I learned a lot, and I trust that you learned a lot too. And keep following us for more of these content.